The winter of 1885 showed no mercy to the Montana Territory. In a weathered schoolhouse at the edge of Thunder Valley, Miss Emma Sullivan fought to keep her students warm with the last pieces of firewood. 6 months a widow, the young schoolteacher hadn't told a soul about the empty larder back home, or the last of her coins spent on medicine that couldn't save her Charles. That's when Marcus Blackwood, owner of the largest cattle ranch this side of the Rockies, discovered her secret. Known as the most hard-headed cowboy in 3 territories, he'd been watching the proud widow teach despite her own suffering. Now, with frost claiming the valley and wolves howling ever closer, he aimed to help her, whether she liked it or not. But in a land where pride runs as deep as the winter snow, could Emma learn to accept the hand of a stranger? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Emma's fingers trembled as she wound Charles' pocket watch, its gold case dulled by constant handling. 7:45, time to ring the school bell. But when she reached for the rope, her arm felt as heavy as lead. 3 days since her last proper meal, and the weakness was becoming harder to hide. "Good morning, Miss Sullivan," little Mary Thompson's voice carried across the frozen schoolyard. The girl clutched a paper-wrapped package to her chest, steam rising from within. "Ma, who sent extra biscuits today?" Emma's stomach clenched, but she forced a smile. "That's very thoughtful, Mary, but I couldn't possibly—" "Please, Miss Sullivan, Ma always makes too many." The lie in the child's eyes was as clear as the frost on the window panes. Sarah Thompson had seen Emma growing thinner, noticed how the teacher's black morning dress hung looser each week. The whole town probably whispered about it over their Sunday suppers. Emma accepted the biscuits with all the dignity she could muster. "Thank you, dear. Now let's get inside before Jack Frost claims our noses." The other children arrived in clusters, stamping snow from their boots. Emma divided the biscuits among the younger ones, ignoring her own hunger. As she turned to the blackboard, Charles's watch pressed against her ribs through her pocket, a constant reminder of time slipping away. She'd been so sure she could manage after Charles died. The school board had kept her on, despite whispers that a widow shouldn't be teaching impressionable children. She'd had some savings, and Charles's life insurance would come eventually. But then the truth about the insurance emerged, along with the gambling debts and the money she'd spent on doctors. "Miss Sullivan," Tommy Baker's voice snapped her from her thoughts. "You wrote the same word 3 times. Emma blinked at the blackboard. Winter repeated in her increasingly shaky handwriting. She quickly erased 2 instances. "Very observant." "And Tommy, now who can use this word in a sentence?" A shadow passed the window, Marcus Blackwood on his big bay stallion, probably heading to the monthly school board meeting. He'd been watching her lately, his dark eyes following her movements. Whenever their paths crossed in town, probably waiting for her to fail like the others. The wealthy rancher had opposed her staying on after Charles's death, arguing that a widow's place wasn't in the schoolroom. The morning crawled by in a haze of arithmetic and grammar lessons. Emma's vision blurred occasionally, but she gripped her desk and pressed on. When noon came, she sent the children out to eat their lunches, claiming paperwork that needed attention. Alone in the schoolroom, she pulled Charles' watch from her pocket. The hands had stopped at 10:47, the moment the doctor had pronounced him dead. She'd tried dozens of times to wind it, but something inside had broken, like her world, like her heart. "Miss Sullivan?" She startled. Marcus Blackwood filled the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking the winter light. She hadn't even heard him approach. "Mr. Blackwood." Emma straightened, tucking the watch away. "The school board meeting isn't until 3. Thought I'd observe some lessons first." He stepped inside, bringing the scent of leather and cold air. "If you don't mind." She minded very much, but he was on the school board. Of course not. He settled into a back bench, far too large for the children's seats. Emma turned to the blackboard, feeling his gaze on her back as she wrote out the afternoon's lessons. Her hand trembled slightly, and she prayed he wouldn't notice. The children returned, red-cheeked from play. If they were surprised to see the imposing rancher in their classroom, they didn't show it. Emma launched into a history lesson about the Louisiana Purchase, trying to ignore how the room occasionally tilted sideways. She was midway through describing Lewis and Clark's expedition when the darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was Marcus Blackwood rising from his seat, concern replacing the usual sternness in his expression. Then the floor rushed up to meet her, and Charles's broken watch pressed against her heart as consciousness slipped away like snow melting in the sun. Emma awoke to whispers and the scratch of a wool blanket against her cheek. She was lying on the schoolroom's small settee, a familiar scent of leather and pine hovering nearby. Poor thing's been starving herself. Sarah Thompson's voice. We all saw it coming. Stubborn as a mule, just like her pa was. That was old Mrs. Baker. Someone needs to do something. Someone already is. Marcus Blackwood's deep rumble silenced the other voices. I'll see her home. Emma forced her eyes open. I can manage. Her voice came out weaker than intended. Clearly, the sarcasm in Marcus's tone made her cheeks burn. He stood over her, his big frame blocking out the afternoon light. Ladies, thank you for your help. I'll handle this. Emma wanted to protest, but the room still spun treacherously. She allowed Marcus to help her to her feet, hating how she had to lean against his solid warmth. The wagon ride to her small house passed in humiliated silence. Emma stared at her hands, remembering how they'd once been plump and pretty. Now they were thin, the bones showing through like birds' wings under paper. Marcus pulled up to her door just as the sun began to set. Without asking permission, he lifted her down from the wagon and carried her inside. The house was dark and cold, no fire in the hearth. "Where's your kindling?" he asked, setting her gently in Charles's old armchair. Emma gestured weakly toward the kitchen. "Don't trouble yourself. I can—" He was already striding away, boots echoing on the wooden floor. She heard him rummaging, then a sharp intake of breath. She knew what he'd found. He returned with an armload of empty medicine bottles, their labels telling a story of Charles's final months, the expensive tonics and powders that had drained their savings, all promising miracles and delivering nothing but false hope. "How much did you spend on these?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Everything." The admission felt like ground glass in her throat. "The doctor and Helena said they were the best chance. Charles was in so much pain." Marcus set the bottles on the mantel, a glass gallery of her desperation. Without comment, he went back to the kitchen. She heard more rummaging, then silence. Then, "Your larder's empty." It wasn't a question. "The medicine—" She couldn't finish. Exhaustion and hunger made her thoughts drift like snow. Marcus knelt before the cold hearth, efficiently building a fire with the last pieces of kindling she'd been hoarding. Her final match flared in his hands, catching the dry wood. "When did you last eat?" The firelight cast his face in sharp relief, highlighting the concern she'd mistaken for judgment. "Yesterday. No, perhaps she couldn't remember." He muttered something that sounded like a curse, then stood. "Stay here. Mr. Blackwood, please." She found her voice, her pride rallying one last time. "I don't need charity." He turned back, and for the first time she saw real anger in his eyes. "This isn't charity, Mrs. Sullivan. This is basic human decency. Something you seem to have forgotten applies to yourself as well as others." The truth of his words struck harder than any physical blow. Emma looked at the medicine bottles, at her skeletal hands, at the empty hearth with its dying fire. She'd been so determined to prove she could manage alone, she hadn't noticed she was dying by inches. "I'll be back," Marcus said, his voice gentler now. "Try to stay awake." The door closed behind him, and Emma was alone with the ghost of her husband and the evidence of her failure. Charles's pocket watch pressed against her side, still marking that final moment. Outside, wolves howled in the gathering dark, their voices carrying the promise of winter's teeth. Emma watched the last flames flicker lower, too weak now to even cry. The medicine bottles caught the dying light, reflecting it back like accusing eyes. She'd spent everything trying to save Charles, and now she had nothing left to save herself. The fire sputtered one final time and went out, leaving her in darkness. As consciousness began to slip away again, Emma thought she heard hoofbeats approaching through the snow. But that might have been just another dream, like her hopes of surviving this winter with her dignity intact. Through the haze of near unconsciousness, Emma heard the crack of splintering wood. Her front door burst open, letting in a blast of winter air and the massive silhouette of Marcus Blackwood. He carried a wooden crate in his arms, steam rising from its contents in the frigid air. "Mrs. Sullivan!" His voice seemed to come from very far away. "Emma!" The use of her Christian name startled her enough to open her eyes. Marcus set the crate down and knelt before her chair, his rough hands capturing her cold ones. "Stay with me," he commanded, and there was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Not pity, but a raw understanding that made her throat tight. He released her hands and moved to the hearth, rebuilding the fire with wood he must have brought. Soon warmth began to seep back into the room. Emma watched through half-closed eyes as he unpacked the crate. Bread still warm from baking, beef stew in a ceramic pot, coffee, sugar, preserved fruits. "I won't take your charity," she whispered, but her treacherous stomach growled at the smell of food. Marcus paused in his work, fixing her with a hard stare. "My wife Catherine said the same thing right up until the end." The words hung in the air between them. Emma had heard whispers about Marcus Blackwood's wife, dead these 5 years, but he'd never spoken of her himself. The doctor told her to rest, to let others help. He spooned stew into a bowl, his movements precise and practiced. But she was too proud, kept teaching at the mission school, kept refusing aid. By the time she finally collapsed, the consumption had too strong a hold. He brought the bowl to Emma, crouching beside her chair. "I watched my wife die because she was too proud to live. I won't watch it happen again." Emma's hands shook as she took the bowl. The first spoonful of stew nearly undid her, rich, warm, and real after so many days of nothing. Tears slid down her cheeks. "Slowly," Marcus cautioned, his voice gentle. "Now, too much at once will make you sick." She managed a few more spoonfuls before her stomach rebelled. Marcus took the bowl, setting it aside, then draped a warm quilt around her shoulders. "Why?" she asked finally. "You opposed me staying on as teacher. You said a widow had no place." "I said a lot of fool things." He stood, moving to stare out the frost-covered window. "I thought, seeing you in that schoolhouse every day, wearing black like Catherine did, I thought it would be like watching her fade away all over again." Understanding dawned. "That's why you've been watching me." He nodded, still facing the window. "At first, then I saw how you were with the children, how you kept going, no matter what, different from Catherine in every way that mattered. And still I waited too long to help. You're helping now." The words came unbidden, surprising them both. He turned back, and in the firelight she saw the years of guilt and grief etched in his face. They stared at each other for a long moment, two people who'd lost too much, recognizing something in each other's pain. The moment broke, when Emma swayed in her chair, exhaustion winning out. Marcus was there instantly, steadying her with those big gentle hands. "You need real rest," he said, "and food and medicine and about 100 other things I should have made sure you had months ago. I can't accept." "You can, and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "I've already sent word to Sarah Thompson. She'll be here soon to help you get settled properly. Tomorrow we'll talk about arrangements." "Arrangements?" "For your care and comfort through the winter." He began stoking the fire again. "I've failed one wife who needed help. I won't fail my children's teacher the same way." Emma wanted to protest, but warmth and food had made her thoughts fuzzy. She watched through heavy lids as Marcus continued bringing in supplies, more wood, blankets, basic provisions. The wooden crate sat by the hearth, a solid promise of survival. "Rest now," she heard him say as consciousness began to fade. "You're not alone anymore." As she drifted off, Emma felt the weight of Charles's watch in her pocket. For the first time since his death, its presence felt less like an anchor and more like a reminder that time moved forward, carrying everyone with it, even those who thought they'd stopped along with broken timepieces. Emma woke to the sound of women's voices and the smell of coffee. Sarah Thompson and Mrs. Baker moved around her kitchen, putting away provisions and speaking in hushed tones. Sunlight streamed through clean windows. Someone had washed away months of grime while she slept. "Look who's finally awake." Sarah brought her a cup of coffee, properly sweetened. "You gave us quite a scare yesterday." Emma sat up slowly in Charles's chair, where she'd apparently spent the night. The quilt Marcus had draped over her slipped to her lap. "I'm sorry to have troubled everyone." "Hush now." Mrs. Baker brought over a plate with scrambled eggs and toast. "Eat first, apologize later." As Emma ate her first real breakfast in weeks, she listened to the women talk. Apparently, Marcus Blackwood had organized quite the operation. Half the town's wives had contributed food and supplies, all delivered under cover of night to spare Emma's pride. "Mr. Blackwood's waiting outside," Sarah said finally. "Says he needs to discuss business with you. We can stay if you'd like." Emma straightened her wrinkled black dress. "No, thank you. I can manage." The women exchanged knowing looks but gathered their things. As they left, Marcus entered, stamping snow from his boots. He carried a leather portfolio and wore his business expression. "Mrs. Sullivan," he settled into the chair opposite her. "I trust you're feeling stronger?" "Yes, thank you." She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Though I'm not sure how I can ever repay," he held up a hand. "That's precisely what I've come to discuss." From his portfolio, he withdrew a piece of brown paper, the kind used for wrapping parcels. On it, he'd written what appeared to be a contract in his bold hand. "I have a proposition for you," he said, placing the paper between them. "One that will benefit us both and maintain your independence." Emma picked up the contract, reading carefully. Her eyes widened. "You want me to teach at your ranch? My hand's children need schooling. 10 of them now, ages 6 to 13. They've been riding 3 hours each way to reach town. With winter setting in, that journey's becoming dangerous. But the town school will manage with a substitute until spring. I've already spoken to the school board." Emma's hands tightened on the paper. "You went to the board without consulting me." "I went to explore possibilities." His voice remained steady. "The final decision is yours, but hear me out first." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You'll have a proper salary, more than the town pays. Room and board in my house, where my housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, can keep an eye on your health. A classroom will be set up in the old library. Come spring, if you wish to return to the town school, no one will stop you." Emma read the contract again. The terms were more than fair, generous even. But something nagged at her. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because I watched my wife die teaching children she loved. Because I've watched you nearly do the same. Because maybe this time I can make a different choice." He stood, moving to the window. "The town's already talking, you know, about yesterday, about me bringing you home, about the supplies." He turned back to her. "This contract gives you a legitimate reason to accept help. Preserves your reputation and your pride. Lets you keep teaching while you recover your strength." Emma looked down at the contract, seeing it now for what it truly was. Not just an agreement, but a lifeline. A way to survive with dignity. "If I accept," she said slowly, "I have conditions." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Name them." "I maintain my own quarters. Complete independence in the classroom. And come spring, I make my own choice about staying or returning to town. Already included in the contract." He produced a pen from his pocket. "Do we have an agreement?" Emma looked around her cold house. At the empty medicine bottles still lined up on the mantel, at Charles's chair, where she'd nearly frozen to death. Then she looked at the contract, with its promise of warmth and purpose and survival. She took the pen. "We do," she said, and signed her name at the bottom of the brown paper. The Blackwood Ranch library smelled of leather-bound books and fresh pine. Emma stood at the newly installed blackboard, watching as her students filed in for their first lesson. Ranch hands children in clean but worn clothing, their faces bright, with curiosity about their new teacher. Mrs. Chen had helped her unpack Charles's pocket watch that morning, placing it on the desk where Emma could see it. But for the first time, she didn't feel its weight like a stone in her heart. "Good morning." "A class," she said, and 10 voices answered with varying degrees of enthusiasm. One little girl, Rosa Martinez, clutched a slate and chalk with such excitement her entire body seemed to vibrate. "Miss Rosa," Emma smiled, "would you like to help me write today's date?" The girl practically flew to the blackboard. As she carefully chalked December 15th, 1885, Emma caught movement at the classroom door. Marcus stood watching, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly before he nodded and moved on. Emma turned back to her class, pushing aside the strange flutter in her chest. The morning passed in a blur of lessons. These children, she discovered, were different from her town students. They spoke of cattle and horses with the same ease others discussed dolls and toys. Many were bilingual, switching effortlessly between English and Spanish or Chinese, thanks to the ranch's diverse workforce. At lunch, Mrs. Chen brought a tray of hot soup and fresh bread. "Mr. Blackwood insists you eat properly," she said with a knowing look. No arguments. Emma had learned not to protest the housekeeper's care. In just 3 days, the tiny Chinese woman had already proven as formidable as Marcus himself. The afternoon session began with art. Emma had them drawing their homes, wanting to understand how they saw their world. Rosa worked with intense concentration, her small tongue poking out the corner of her mouth. When she brought her drawing forward, Emma's breath caught. There was the classroom, rendered in careful detail, but Rosa had added something. A figure, at the window, watching. Marcus, unmistakable even in a child's drawing, his stance protective rather than imposing. "He watches to make sure you're getting better," Rosa whispered. "Papa says Mr. Blackwood smiles more now that you're here." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you, Rosa. This is lovely work." As the children filed out at day's end, Emma sat at her desk, studying the drawing. She hadn't noticed Marcus watching today, but Rosa clearly had. What else had these observant children seen? "Teacher's got a sweetheart." The sing-song voice made her head snap up. 2 of the older boys stood in the doorway, giggling. "Samuel." "Martinez, Jacob Chen, that's quite enough." But her stern tone was undermined by the blush she couldn't quite control. "Sorry, Mrs. Sullivan." They scampered away, their laughter echoing down the hall. Emma touched Charles's watch, a habit now more than a necessity. The glass face reflected the late afternoon light, and with it, her own changed expression. Was that a spark of life in her eyes that hadn't been there before? A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Marcus again, this time entering with purpose. "The children seem happy," he said, studying Rosa's drawing, which still lay on her desk. "You've worked magic already." They're bright students eager to learn. She began gathering her books, aware of his presence like warmth from a stove. "Mrs. Chen tells me you're eating better." "Mrs. Chen tells you everything, I suspect." Was that a smile tugging at his mouth? "She takes her duties seriously." "As do you." Emma gestured to the drawing. "Rosa seems to think you're standing guard." Now he did smile, briefly but genuinely. "Smart girl, that one." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Join me for dinner. Mrs. Chen's making dumplings, and she'll fret if you eat alone." Emma should have refused, should have maintained the professional distance her position required. But the memory of those lonely meals in her cold house was still too fresh. "Thank you," she said. "I'd like that." As they walked to the main house together, Emma realized she'd left Charles's watch on her desk. More surprising still, she hadn't even noticed until now. The wolves came during arithmetic lessons. Emma was explaining long division when she heard it, a low growl that made every ranch child freeze in recognition. "Away from the windows," she ordered quietly, her heart thundering against her ribs. "Samuel, Jacob, help the little ones to the back corner." Through the frost-etched glass, she saw them, 3 grey shadows slinking across the snow. The bitter winter had driven them down from the mountains, desperate and bold. Rosa whimpered. Emma gathered the child close, mentally counting her. Students, 10 children, 2 windows, 1 door. The main house was 100 yards away across open ground. Another growl, closer now. Emma could see their breath fogging the glass, yellow eyes peering in. The largest wolf scratched at the door, wood creaking under its weight. "Mrs. Sullivan?" Little Michael Chen's voice quavered. "What do we do?" Before she could answer, a sharp crack split the air. The children screamed as the doorframe splintered. Emma grabbed Charles's watch from her desk, not for time, but for the heavy gold weight of it. If the wolves got in, she'd go down fighting. The door burst open, but instead of wolves, Marcus filled the doorway, rifle raised. 2 shots cracked. Across the winter air, 1 wolf fell. The others turned to face this new threat, teeth bared. The largest wolf lunged. Marcus swung his rifle like a club, catching it across the muzzle. The beast yelped but came again. Emma watched in horror. As wolf and man grappled in the snow, rifle forgotten, Marcus's knife flashing silver in the winter light. "Inside!" Another voice. Thomas Martinez, Rosa's father, running toward them with more ranch hands. But Emma couldn't move, couldn't breathe, watching Marcus wrestle with death itself. The wolf's teeth snapped inches from his throat. Marcus's knife plunged home. Hot blood stained the snow as the beast went limp. The 3rd wolf fled into the trees. Marcus stood slowly, his coat torn and bloody. Emma couldn't tell how much blood was his. "Everyone safe?" His voice was rough, eyes finding hers. She nodded, unable to speak. The children rushed to the doorway, excitement overtaking fear now that danger had passed. "Did you see Mr. Blackwood fight that wolf?" Samuel's eyes shone with hero worship. "Like David against the lion," Jacob added. Marcus ignored their chatter, crossing to Emma. His hands gripped her shoulders, eyes searching her face. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still clutching Charles's watch. His fingers tightened briefly before letting go. "Thomas," he called, "get someone to dress these wolves. Children, lessons are done for today. Mrs. Sullivan needs rest." "I'm fine," Emma protested, but her legs chose that moment to give way. Marcus caught her before she could fall. "Of course you are." His voice held a gentleness that made her throat tight. "But humor me." He swept her up as if she weighed nothing, ignoring her startled gasp. The children watched wide-eyed as he carried her toward the main house. "Mr. Blackwood, really, I can walk." "Mrs. Sullivan," he said quietly, "for once in your life, let someone else be strong." She fell silent, aware of his heart pounding against her ear, the trembling in his arms that had nothing to do with her weight. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, clucking in dismay. "Bring her to the parlor. I'll fetch brandy." He set her gently in a chair before the fire. She noticed his hands were bleeding from the fight. "You're hurt." Scratches. But he didn't pull away when she caught his hands, examining the cuts. "These need cleaning." She looked up to find him watching her, something raw in his expression. "I thought—" He stopped, swallowed. "When I saw those wolves at the schoolroom door, you saved us." She was still holding his hands, she realized. She should let go. She didn't. "I should have been closer, should have seen them coming. You were there when it mattered." Mrs. Chen returned with brandy and bandages, breaking the moment. As she fussed over Marcus's wounds, Emma heard the ranch hands talking outside. They were skinning the wolves, saving the pelts as trophies. But they were more than trophies, she knew. Like the watch she still clutched, they were reminders of how quickly life could change, how precious it was. Tomorrow, the town would hear. How Marcus Blackwood had fought wolves with his bare hands to protect the widow schoolteacher. They would talk, speculate, judge. But for now, watching him wince as Mrs. Chen cleaned his cuts, Emma found she didn't care what anyone thought. He had come for her children. That was all that mattered. The town's reaction to the wolf attack was swift and predictable. Emma heard the whispers when she visited the general store 3 days later. How Marcus had carried her to the house, how she was living under his roof, how inappropriate it all was for a widow not yet a year into her mourning. She found Marcus in his study that evening, a small velvet box on his desk and trouble in his eyes. "You've heard the talk," he said without preamble. "I have." She remained in the doorway, somehow knowing this conversation would change everything. "I won't have your reputation ruined." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold band. "Not when there's a solution," Emma's breath caught. "Mr. Blackwood, a marriage of convenience," he said quickly. "To protect your position, your good name. Nothing more need change." She stared at the ring. It wasn't Charles's, that one was buried with him. This was new, yet somehow felt heavier. "The children need their teacher," Marcus continued. "The ranch needs stability. This solves everything." "Everything except matters of the heart," Emma said softly. He flinched slightly. "I'm not asking for your heart, Mrs. Sullivan, only your hand." "And what of Catherine's memory?" His fingers tightened on the box. "Catherine would understand practical necessity." Emma moved closer, studying the ring. Simple, unadorned, like the practical arrangement it represented. Yet something about it made her pulse quicken. "The town will talk regardless," she said. "Let them. Better they gossip about a proper marriage than—" He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. Emma thought of her students, of Rosa's drawing still pinned to her classroom wall, of wolves and warmth and hands that bled to protect her. "If I agree," she said carefully, "I have conditions." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You always do. I keep my independence, my teaching, my own rooms." "Agreed. And we're honest. With each other always. No pretty lies about love or forever." His expression darkened. "I would never offer false promises." Emma picked up the ring, letting it catch the lamplight. "Then yes, Mr. Blackwood, I'll marry you." He took the ring. From her fingers, his touch careful as he slipped it onto her hand. It fit perfectly, as if it had been sized for her. Knowing Marcus's attention to detail, it probably had been. "Marcus," he said quietly, "if we're to be married, you should use my Christian name." "Marcus," the name felt strange on her tongue. "And you should call me Emma." They stood in awkward silence, the weight of their decision filling the room. Finally, he cleared his throat. "I'll speak to Reverend Matthews tomorrow. A quick, quiet ceremony would be best." Emma nodded, twisting the new ring on her finger. "Will you tell the children or shall I?" "Together," he said. "We should present a united front." She looked up at him then, this man who had saved her. Life twice now, once from winter's cold, once from winter's wolves. His expression was carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes when they met hers. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For making this feel like a choice, not a necessity." He reached out, almost touching her cheek before letting his hand fall. "Good night, Emma." She left his study with steady steps, though her heart hammered against her ribs. In her room, she took off Charles's watch for the first time since his death, placing it beside her new ring. Old love and new possibility, she thought. Past and future bound together by gold and necessity and something else she wasn't ready to name. Outside her window, snow began to fall, soft and silent as secrets. Emma stood before the chapel's small mirror, adjusting her dove-grey dress. Not black. Marcus had insisted on that much. "No morning clothes for a new beginning," he'd said, and she'd found she couldn't argue. Mrs. Chen fussed with Emma's hair, weaving small white flowers into the simple bun. "There. Pretty bride, even without fancy things." Emma touched the flowers gently. "They're perfect, Mrs. Chen." "Thank you." The housekeeper's eyes met hers in the mirror. "Mr. Marcus, he good man, lonely too long, like you." Before Emma could respond, Rosa burst into the room, her own grey dress matching Emma's. Papa says it's time. The chapel was nearly empty, just the ranch hands and their families, Reverend Matthews and Marcus, waiting at the altar. No townfolk had been invited. This wasn't a celebration after all, just a practical solution to an awkward situation. But when Emma walked down the aisle, Marcus's expression made her steps falter. He looked at her the way parched earth looks at rain clouds, desperate for something he didn't dare hope for. The ceremony was brief. They spoke the traditional words clearly, their voices steady. When Marcus slipped the gold band onto her finger, his hands were warm and sure. Emma found herself wondering if he could feel her pulse racing beneath his touch. Reverend Matthews presented the marriage certificate with a flourish. "Please sign here, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood." Emma's hand trembled slightly as she took the pen. Mrs. Blackwood, not Sullivan anymore. The certificate made it real in a way the ceremony hadn't. This elegant document with its flowing script and official seal binding her to Marcus in the eyes of the law. She signed her new name for the first time, watching the ink dry. Marcus added his signature beside hers, his bold strokes making her careful letters seem delicate in comparison. "Congratulations," the Reverend said, but his tone held a hint of judgment. No doubt he thought it too soon after Charles's death, too rushed, too pragmatic to be proper. The small reception was held in the ranch house dining room. Mrs. Chen had outdone herself with the food, and the children added joy to what could have been a somber occasion. They clustered around Emma, admiring her flowers and dress. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Rosa asked, eyes bright with hope. Emma glanced at Marcus, who had paused in his conversation with Thomas Martinez. "Yes," she said softly. "I'm staying." As evening fell, the guests departed. Emma stood in the parlor, watching snow begin to fall outside. The certificate lay on Marcus's desk, ink now dry, names forever linked. "Your rooms are ready," Marcus said from behind her. "Mrs. Chen added some touches she thought you'd like." Emma turned to face her new husband. In the firelight, his expression was impossible to read. "Thank you for all of this." He moved closer, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he reached out and touched one of the small white flowers in her hair. "Winter roses," he said. "Catherine grew them in her greenhouse. Mrs. Chen must have been saving them." The mention of his first wife should have felt like a wall between them. Instead, it was a bridge, an offering of memory and trust. "They're beautiful," Emma said, "like something blooming against all odds." His hand dropped to his side. "You should rest. The children will be especially energetic tomorrow, wanting to hear all about their teacher's wedding." She nodded, turning toward the stairs. At the bottom step she paused. "Good night, husband." She heard his sharp intake of breath, but didn't turn back. In her new rooms, she found Mrs. Chen had indeed been busy. Fresh curtains, extra quilts, and a small painting of winter roses hung above her bed. On her pillow lay Charles's pocket watch, carefully polished. Beside it, a note in Marcus's strong hand. "The past keeps time with the present. Both have their place." Emma picked up the watch, then looked at her new ring. Behind her closed door, she could hear Marcus moving in his study, the soft sound of papers being shuffled, probably filing away their marriage certificate, making everything official and proper. Proper, she thought. But why did her heart race every time he looked at her? Why did her skin tingle where he'd touched her hair? And why, despite all their careful words about convenience and practicality, did this feel like something else entirely? The first week of married life settled into an odd rhythm. Emma taught her classes, Marcus managed the ranch, and they met for meals in a dance of careful courtesy. If the children noticed anything strange about their teacher's new last name, they didn't mention it. Emma discovered Marcus's habits gradually. He rose before dawn, worked until dusk, and spent evenings in his study with ledgers and letters. Sometimes she heard him pacing late at night, his footsteps a steady rhythm above her room. She found the rose on a Monday morning, perfectly preserved in ice on her windowsill. It must have fallen from her wedding bouquet, been caught by the freezing wind, and transformed into something haunting and beautiful. "It's like a fairy tale flower," Rosa said when Emma brought it to class. Frozen in time until true love's kiss. Emma felt her cheeks warm. It's simply a quirk of nature, dear. Now back to your geography lesson. But throughout the day, she caught herself glancing at the rose, wondering. That evening, she found Marcus in Catherine's old greenhouse, tending to the winter roses that still bloomed there. The children were fascinated by the frozen rose, she said by way of greeting. He didn't turn from his work. Rosa's been telling everyone it's magic. Children see magic everywhere. And adults? Now he did turn, those dark eyes finding hers. What do we see? Emma moved closer, watching him prune dead leaves with precise cuts. Practicality, necessity, safe harbors. Is that what this is? A safe harbor? His tone was carefully neutral, but something in it made her pulse quicken. Isn't that what we agreed upon? Marcus set down his shears, closing the distance between them. And if I told you, I'm finding it harder to remember that agreement with each passing day. Emma's breath caught. He stood close enough now that she could feel his warmth, smell the leather and pine scent of him. Marcus, I watch you with the children, he said softly. I hear you humming in the kitchen. I find myself looking for you in every room. This isn't what I expected. What did you expect? A proper arrangement. Distance. Not this. He gestured helplessly. Not wanting. The word hung between them like frost. Emma thought of the frozen rose, suspended between states, neither living nor dead, waiting for transformation. I should go, she whispered. The children's essays need grading. He stepped back, mask falling into place. Of course. Good. Evening, Mrs. Blackwood. She fled the greenhouse, heart thundering. In her room, she found Charles's watch and held it like a talisman. But instead of comfort, it offered a question. Was it betrayal to want again? To feel her heart thaw like spring beneath another man's gaze? The next morning, she found a fresh rose on her desk. Not frozen this time, warm and alive, red as heartbreak. No note, but she knew who had left it. Her students noticed her distraction. Are you sad, Mrs. Blackwood? Michael Chen asked during arithmetic. No, dear, just thinking about Mr. Blackwood. Rosa's knowing smile made Emma wonder when children had grown so perceptive. That evening, she didn't retreat to her room after dinner. Instead, she joined Marcus in his study, taking the chair opposite his desk. The children think I'm sad, she said. He looked up sharply. Are you? No, but I'm not sure what I am. She twisted her wedding ring. This isn't what I expected either. Marcus set down his pen. What did you expect? Safety, simplicity. She met his eyes. Not lying awake listening for your footsteps, not feeling like I'm betraying a ghost by wanting more than an arrangement. He stood slowly, as if afraid she might bolt. And what do you want, Emma? I don't know. Her voice trembled. And that terrifies me. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then we wait until you do know, and if that takes too long, then we wait longer. He smiled slightly. I'm a patient man, Emma. Ask anyone who's seen me break horses. She laughed. Despite herself, tension easing. Is that what you're doing? Breaking me to saddle? God, no. His expression sobered. I'm waiting for you to choose to run with me. Outside the study windows, snow fell steadily. Emma thought of the frozen rose, of transformation, of the difference between breaking and choosing. She stood, smoothing her skirts. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Emma. She left his study knowing something had shifted between them, like ice cracking on a spring river. Not broken yet, but changing, inevitable as seasons. The blizzard struck without warning. One moment Emma was dismissing her students early as snow began to fall. The next, the world had vanished in a howling wall of white. Everyone stays here, Marcus commanded, appearing in the schoolroom doorway, like a snow-covered ghost. Thomas, get word to the families. The children are safe with us tonight. The ranch hand's children seemed more excited than frightened by the prospect of a sleepover in the main house. Mrs. Chen organized them into helping teams, distributing blankets and arranging sleeping places in the parlor. Emma kept them occupied, with stories while the storm raged. As evening deepened into night, the children gradually dozed off in their makeshift beds. "You have a gift," Marcus said softly, appearing beside her with a worn quilt, handmade by the look of it. "They trust you completely. They're good children." She watched Rosa curl closer to her brother in sleep. "Will their parents be very worried?" Thomas got word to everyone before the worst hit. "They know the children are safe." He held out the quilt. "You're shivering." She hadn't noticed until he mentioned it, but the fire was burning low, and the storm's chill crept through every crack. She accepted the blanket, recognizing the careful stitching. "Catherine made this," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, settling beside her on the parlor's window seat. "During our first winter here, said every proper home needed at least one handmade quilt." Without asking, he drew part of the blanket over his own legs, sharing its warmth. Emma should have protested, but the storm's ferocity made ordinary proprieties seem distant and unimportant. "Tell me about her," she said impulsively. Not how she died. How she lived." Marcus was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She loved impossible things, growing roses in winter, teaching English to cowboys, taming wild horses and wild men." He smiled slightly. "I was quite wild when she found me." "And she tamed you?" "She civilized me. There's a difference." His shoulder pressed against hers, warm through layers of clothing. "She taught me that strength isn't about forcing your will on the world. It's about knowing when to yield." Emma thought about that. "Is that why you waited? With me?" "Partly." His voice dropped lower. "Mostly I waited because you needed to. Heal. And because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I needed to be sure I wasn't just seeking a replacement for what I'd lost. And now? Now I know you're nothing like Catherine. You're entirely yourself, Emma Blackwood, and that's who I find myself wanting." The confession hung in the storm-muffled air. Emma clutched the quilt tighter, feeling the years of love stitched into every seam. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what? Of wanting back? Of betraying Charles? Of losing again?" Marcus turned to face her, his expression grave in the firelight. "Do you think Charles would want you to stay frozen? Never love again?" "No." The answer came more easily than she expected. "He always said love was meant to be shared, but knowing that here," she touched her head, "isn't the same as feeling it here." Her hand moved to her heart. "I understand." Marcus's fingers found hers beneath the quilt. "We carry them with us, Catherine and Charles, but they don't own our futures." Emma looked at their joined hands, at the wedding ring that had meant one thing and now meant something else entirely. "When did you know that this was becoming more than arrangement?" "The day you signed our marriage certificate. You had flowers in your hair and strength in your spine, and I realized I was in danger of falling in love with my own wife." The words, stolen and practical all at once, made her laugh softly. "What a scandal!" "Indeed." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "The question is, Mrs. Blackwood, what do we do about it?" Instead of answering, Emma leaned forward and kissed him. It was a gentle thing, brief as a snowflake landing, but it changed everything. When she pulled back, Marcus's eyes were wide with surprise and something deeper. "Emma, I'm still afraid," she whispered, "but I'm tired of being frozen." He cupped her face with a calloused hand, and this time when they kissed it felt like thawing, like spring, like hope blooming in winter. The quilt slipped forgotten to their feet as they held each other, witnessed only by sleeping children and the howling storm. The blizzard struck without warning. One moment Emma was dismissing her students early as snow began to fall. The next, the world had vanished in a howling wall of white. "Everyone stays here," Marcus commanded, appearing in the schoolroom doorway, like a snow-covered ghost. "Thomas, get word to the families. The children are safe with us tonight." The ranch hand's children seemed more excited than frightened by the prospect of a sleepover in the main house. Mrs. Chen organized them into helping teams, distributing blankets and arranging sleeping places in the parlor. Emma kept them occupied with stories while the storm raged. As evening deepened into night, the children gradually dozed off in their makeshift beds. "You have a gift," Marcus said softly, appearing beside her with a worn quilt. Handmade by the look of it. "They trust you completely. They're good children." She watched Rosa curl closer to her brother in sleep. "Will their parents be very worried?" Thomas got word to everyone before the worst hit. "They know the children are safe." He held out the quilt. "You're shivering." She hadn't noticed until he mentioned it, but the fire was burning low, and the storm's chill crept through every crack. She accepted the blanket, recognizing the careful stitching. "Catherine made this," she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded, settling beside her on the parlor's window seat. "During our first winter here, said every proper home needed at least one handmade quilt." Without asking, he drew part of the blanket over his own legs, sharing its warmth. Emma should have protested, but the storm's ferocity made ordinary proprieties seem distant and unimportant. "Tell me about her," she said impulsively. Not how she died. How she lived." Marcus was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She loved impossible things, growing roses in winter, teaching English to cowboys, taming wild horses and wild men." He smiled slightly. "I was quite wild when she found me. And she tamed you. She civilized me. There's a difference." His shoulder pressed against hers, warm through layers of clothing. "She taught me that strength isn't about forcing your will on the world. It's about knowing when to yield." Emma thought about that. "Is that why you waited? With me?" "Partly." His voice dropped lower. "Mostly, I waited because you needed to. Heal. And because..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I needed to be sure I wasn't just seeking a replacement for what I'd lost. And now I know you're nothing like Catherine. You're entirely yourself, Emma Blackwood, and that's who I find myself wanting." The confession hung in the storm-muffled air. Emma clutched the quilt tighter, feeling the years of love stitched into every seam. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of what? Of wanting back, of betraying Charles, of losing again." Marcus turned to face her, his expression grave in the firelight. "Do you think Charles would want you to stay frozen? Never love again?" "No." The answer came more easily than she expected. "He always said love was meant to be shared. But knowing that here," she touched her head, "isn't the same as feeling it here." Her hand moved to her heart. "I understand." Marcus's fingers found hers beneath the quilt. "We carry them with us, Catherine and Charles. But they don't own our futures." Emma looked at their joined hands, at the wedding ring that had meant one thing and now meant something else entirely. "When did you know that this was becoming more than arrangement?" "The day you signed our marriage certificate. You had flowers in your hair and strength in your spine, and I realized I was in danger of falling in love with my own wife." The words, stolen and practical all at once, made her laugh softly. "What a scandal." "Indeed." His thumb traced patterns on her palm. "The question is, Mrs. Blackwood, what do we do about it?" Instead of answering, Emma leaned forward and kissed him. It was a gentle thing, brief as a snowflake landing, but it changed everything. When she pulled back, Marcus's eyes were wide with surprise and something deeper. "Emma, I'm still afraid," she whispered, "but I'm tired of being frozen." He cupped her face with a calloused hand, and this time when they kissed it felt like thawing, like spring, like hope blooming in winter. The quilt slipped forgotten. To their feet, as they held each other, witnessed only by sleeping children and the howling storm. The Helena newspaper arrived with the morning mail, yellowed and months old. Emma might have discarded it unopened if she hadn't glimpsed a familiar name in the column of death notices. Sullivan. Her hands trembled as she read, "Charles Sullivan, 37, died of consumption and complications from injuries sustained in an altercation at the Golden Nugget gambling house. Survived by wife Emma Sullivan of Thunder Valley. Sullivan leaves substantial debts to several prominent Helena businessmen, calling into question the circumstances of his demise." The words blurred. Emma sat heavily in Marcus's study chair, the paper crackling in her grip. All those months. believing Charles had died nobly, fighting illness while trying to provide for her. All those medicines she'd bought with their savings, not knowing he'd already gambled away their future. Emma, Marcus stood in the doorway, his expression changing as he saw the paper. Ah, I wondered when that would surface. She looked up, sharply. You knew? He crossed to her slowly, as if approaching a spooked horse. I made inquiries after we married. Wanted to ensure there wouldn't be complications. Complications? Her voice rose. Like my dead husband's gambling debts, the ones he died trying to escape, the ones I paid off 3 months ago. The words fell like stones in still water. Emma stared at him, the paper forgotten in her lap. You... what? Marcus knelt beside her chair. Those prominent Helena businessmen were loan sharks. They wouldn't have hesitated to come after you for payment. I couldn't risk that. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready to know. He touched her hand gently. You needed to grieve the Charles you knew before facing the Charles he became. Anger flared. That wasn't your decision to make. No. He didn't defend himself, just held her gaze steadily. It wasn't. I'm sorry. Emma stood abruptly, needing space. The newspaper fell to the floor, its damning words face up. She'd taught her students about truth just yesterday. How it could hurt, but was always better than lies. I feel like such a fool, she whispered, starving myself to buy medicines while he was losing everything at cards. You weren't a fool. Marcus's voice was fierce. You were loyal and loving. His choices don't diminish your goodness, but they diminish him. Tears came then, hot and angry. I've been mourning a lie. You've been mourning a man, a flawed human man who loved you even if he failed you. Marcus stayed where he was, giving her space to rage. That love wasn't a lie, Emma. She wrapped her arms around herself, staring out the study window. Spring had painted the valley green, but storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Like her, heart, warmth and shadows warring. I trusted you, she said finally. Why keep this from me? Because I love you. The simple declaration stopped her pacing. She turned to face him. I love you, he repeated, and I wanted to protect you. Wrongly, perhaps, but there it is. Like you couldn't protect Catherine? The moment she said it, she wished she could take it back. Marcus flinched as if struck, but his voice remained steady. Yes, exactly like that. I'm not very good at watching women I love suffer. The anger drained from her, leaving only bone-deep weariness. I don't know what to do with this truth. You don't have to do anything right now. He stood, slowly. Take time, think, be angry at Charles, at me, at the whole damned world, if it helps. Emma looked at the newspaper, at this evidence of human frailty and love's complexity. Will you hold me? She asked suddenly. Just hold me while I decide how to feel? Marcus crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms. She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him, leather and pine and safety. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair, both for his betrayal and mine. I know. And she did. Understanding bloomed even through the hurt. Understanding of Charles's desperate gambles, of Marcus's protective silence, of her own strength in facing hard truths. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. But here in Marcus's arms, Emma felt anchored against the storm, not by ignorance anymore, but by choice, by love that saw flaws and chose to stay anyway. She picked up the newspaper, folded it carefully, and placed it in Marcus's desk drawer. Not hidden, not forgotten, but filed away with other hard lessons that had shaped them both. The town social fell on the hottest day of summer. Emma smoothed her new blue dress, not grey, not black, but the color of Montana's endless sky. Marcus had ordered it special from Denver, though she hadn't known why until the invitation arrived. Your dance card, Mrs. Blackwood. Sarah Thompson pressed the little ivory booklet into her hand, though I suspect it'll only need one name. Emma opened the delicate card, her throat tightening at the sight of Marcus's bold handwriting already. Filling every line. He'd claimed every dance, proper or not. The social hall bloomed with summer flowers and bright dresses. Even the hardest gossips had trouble maintaining their disapproval in the face of such festivity. Emma felt their eyes following her as she entered on Marcus's arm, but for once she didn't care. "Ready?" he murmured. "For what?" "To scandalize the entire town." His eyes danced with mischief. "I intend to dance every dance with my wife. Marcus Blackwood, are you trying to ruin my reputation?" "No." He drew her onto the dance floor as the first waltz began. "I'm trying to show everyone exactly how much I love you." The words, spoken so publicly, made her cheeks flush. Around them, conversations stuttered and stalled as people realized the wealthy rancher was actually smiling, actually holding his wife of convenience like she was made of precious gold. "They're staring," Emma whispered as he turned her expertly around the floor. "Let them. I've waited long enough to do this properly." His hand was warm against her back, his steps sure as he guided her through the waltz. Emma remembered their wedding dance, proper, distant, a performance of necessity. This was something else entirely. "I love you too," she said softly, and felt his steps falter for just a moment. "Say it again." "I love you, Marcus Blackwood." He pulled her closer. Then was strictly proper, but Emma found she didn't mind. Let them talk. Let them see. This was real and true and hard-won. Rosa darted between dancing couples to reach them. "Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood, look what I made." She thrust a paper at them. A drawing of their dance with hearts and flowers around the edges. Emma laughed in delight. "It's beautiful, dear, but shouldn't you be in bed? Mama said I could stay up to see the dancing." Rosa beamed at them. "You look like a fairy tale." Marcus swept the child up with his free arm, never missing a step of the dance. "And what do fairy tales teach us, Miss Rosa?" "That love wins." She threw her arms around his neck. "I knew you. Loved each other for real. I told everyone." Emma met Marcus's eyes over Rosa's dark head, out of the mouths of babes. "She's smarter than most of the adults in this town." He set Rosa down gently. "Now run, tell your mama that Mrs. Blackwood, and I will be taking all your classmates on a picnic next week." As Rosa skipped away, Emma raised an eyebrow. "We will, unless you object. I thought it was time we started acting like a real family, not just looking like one in Rosa's drawings." The music changed to a livelier tune. Marcus spun her into the new dance as if they'd been partners all their lives. "No objections," Emma said, "though you might regret offering to wrangle 10 children on a picnic." 11. His expression turned serious. If you'd consider the possibility, someday." Emma's heart stuttered. "Marcus, not now, not tomorrow, but someday when you're ready, I'd like to fill that big house with more than just memories." She thought of Catherine's roses still blooming in the greenhouse, of Charles's watch in her jewelry box, of past love making room for future joy. "Someday," she agreed, and his brilliant smile was worth every shocked whisper, every raised eyebrow in the hall. They danced every dance just as he'd promised. Emma's feet ached and her cheeks hurt from smiling, but she couldn't remember ever feeling so alive. When the final song ended, Marcus didn't release her. Instead, in front of God and Thunder Valley's finest, he kissed her. Not the proper peck of a marriage of convenience, but the deep, sweet kiss of a man in love with his wife. The hall fell silent. Then Rosa started clapping, and suddenly everyone was applauding. The ranch hands and their families first, then even the town folk who'd been so quick to judge. Emma pressed her face into Marcus's chest, laughing and embarrassed, and utterly happy. He held up her dance card, its pages filled with his name. "In case anyone was wondering," he announced to the hall, "I intend to fill every dance card for the rest of our lives." "Scandalous," Emma whispered. "Absolutely." He kissed her again, shorter this time, but no less sweet. "Take me home, Mrs. Blackwood." She tucked the dance card into her pocket next to her heart. "Always." Harvest season painted the valley in gold and amber. Emma stood in the shadow of rising walls, watching as ranch hands and townsmen worked together to build her school. The framework already stood proud against the autumn sky, twice the size of her old classroom. The roof goes on today, Marcus said, coming up beside her. His shirt was dusty from hauling lumber, sleeves rolled up to show tanned forearms. Think we'll finish before the first snow. I still can't believe you're doing this. We're doing this. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. And speaking of which, Emma recognized the official seal of the Territory Bank. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the deed. Joint ownership, she read aloud. Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Blackwood, your school, he said softly, your dream, but our future. She traced their names on the deed, remembering another document that had joined them, their marriage certificate, signed for convenience. This one felt different, a choice made in love, not necessity. Marcus, she stopped, emotion-making, her throat tight. He squeezed her shoulder. You've given these children so much, given me so much. Let me give something back. A hammer's crack drew their attention. Thomas Martinez was showing his son Samuel how to drive nails true. Their dark heads bent together over the task. Near them, Michael Chen and his father worked, on window frames, speaking rapid Cantonese between measurements. It's more than just a school, Emma said. It's a symbol that everyone's children deserve an education, that Thunder Valley believes in its future, that love builds things to last. Marcus tucked a stray hair behind her ear. Speaking of building, yes, I had Thompson add an extra room, behind the classroom. Emma looked at him questioningly. A nursery, he said quietly, for someday, when you're ready. Her heart swelled. Before she could respond, Rosa came running up, her dress dusty from helping the builders. Mrs. Blackwood, come see what Papa wrote over the door. Emma followed the girl around to the front of the building. There, carved into the lintel in careful letters, were the words Thunder Valley School, founded by Emma Blackwood. Your legacy, Marcus said from behind her, though I hope it won't be your only one. His hand brushed her stomach, gentle with possibility. Emma covered his hand with hers. About that someday, his breath caught. Emma, Mrs. Chen thinks, that is, I'm fairly certain. She turned to face him. Someday might be closer than we thought. For a moment, Marcus stood frozen. Then he lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle that made the workers cheer and whistle. Put me down, you fool. But she was laughing, clinging to his shoulders. Never. He set her gently on her feet, but kept his arms around her. Are you happy? Emma looked at the school rising proud and strong, at the deed in her hand promising. Future and hope, at the love shining in her husband's eyes. I never thought I could be this happy again, she admitted, after Charles. I thought that part of life was over. And now? Now I know that love doesn't end. It just changes, grows, makes room for more. She touched the carved letters of her name. Like this school, we're building on the foundation of what came before, but creating something new. Marcus kissed her, heedless of their audience. When they parted, Rosa was making gagging noises, while Samuel pretended to faint. Back to work, Marcus called, but his grin belied the command. The men returned to their tasks, though Emma heard the whispers spreading, about the kiss, about the way she'd glowed announcing her news. By sunset, the whole valley would know the Blackwoods were expecting. Let them talk, she thought. This time, the gossip would be about joy, not scandal. She looked down at the deed again, at their names linked together in legal script, so different from their marriage certificate, that cautious document of convenience and necessity. This paper spoke of partnership, of shared dreams, of love, building something permanent. I need to check the supply lists, she said reluctantly. Marcus brushed a kiss across her temple. Go, build your school, build our future. Emma tucked the deed into her pocket, patted the carved lintel once for luck, and went to ensure her school would be perfect. Behind her, she heard Marcus whistling as he returned to work, the sound mixing with hammer strikes and children's laughter to create a symphony of hope. Winter returned to Thunder Valley with bitter vengeance. 1 year since Emma had nearly frozen in her empty house, she found herself again watching someone she loved battle fever and frost. Marcus had insisted on helping the Martinez family repair their roof before the worst storms hit. "Can't have Rosa's family freezing," he'd said, ignoring the bite in the wind. Hours in the cold and wet had taken their toll. Now he burned with fever in their bed, his skin hot as summer while winter raged outside. Emma twisted both their wedding rings on her finger, his removed for safety when the fever made him restless. The two gold bands clinked together. Old promises meeting new fears. "Catherine," he called, lost in fever dreams. "Catherine, I'm sorry." Emma pressed a cool cloth to his forehead. "Shh, love, rest." His eyes opened, glazed but seeking. "Emma, I'm here. Don't leave." His hand found hers, fingers searching for his missing ring. "Never." She slipped his wedding band back onto his finger, and his breathing eased. Mrs. Chen appeared with fresh tea and worry in her eyes. "Like before," she said softly. "When Catherine—" "No," Emma's voice was fierce. "Not like before. I won't lose him." The housekeeper nodded, understanding the determination that had once kept Emma teaching through hunger and grief. This was a woman who had learned to fight for love. Through the long night, Emma maintained her vigil. She spooned broth between Marcus's cracked lips, bathed his burning skin, and whispered promises into the darkness. "You carried me through winter," she told him. "Now let me carry you." In his lucid moments, he tried to smile. "Not what you signed up for when you agreed to marry me. No, it's so much more." She kissed his palm. "We're having a baby, remember? You're not allowed to leave us." His fever-bright eyes found her slightly rounded belly. "A baby? Yes, love. Your son needs you to fight. Could be a daughter. Either way, this child needs their father." She pressed his hand to her stomach. "Feel that? That's your reason to stay." Through the window, she could see the school they'd built together, standing proud against the storm. Their legacy, their future. Not finished yet. Thomas Martinez came to report on the ranch, his voice low with respect for the sick room. "The hands were managing," he assured her. "Everything would wait for the boss to recover." "He will recover," Emma said, and Thomas nodded, believing in her certainty. Rosa snuck in with a drawing. The whole family together, including a small bundle in Emma's arms. "For when Mr. Blackwood feels better," she whispered. Emma hung it where Marcus could see it when his eyes were clear. A reminder of everything waiting for him. On the third night, his fever broke. Emma was dozing in the bedside chair when his voice, stronger now, woke her. "You should be in bed, Mrs. Blackwood." She blinked awake to find him watching her, eyes clear and present. "Marcus, who else would be in your bed?" His attempt at humor was weak, but it was him, really him. Emma burst into tears. Now. He tried to reach for her, but his arms were still too weak. "Come here, love." She curled carefully beside him, mindful of his fragile strength. His fingers found their wedding rings on her hand. "You've been wearing both," he observed. "Keeping them safe for us." She slipped his ring back onto his finger. "Like you kept me safe last winter. We keep each other safe now." He touched her stomach. "All of us." Emma remembered another sick room, another vigil that had ended differently. "I was so afraid." "Catherine's death wasn't your fault," he said softly. "Just like Charles's wasn't mine. We can't change the past, but we can choose the future." She laid her head on his chest, listening to his steady heartbeat. "And I choose you, every time." Outside, the winter storm began to ease. Emma felt Marcus's breathing deepen into healing sleep, his hand still curved protectively around their growing child. Their wedding rings caught the dim light, two circles of gold promising that love, like seasons, could return stronger after loss. Spring came early to Thunder Valley, as if nature itself was celebrating Marcus's recovery. Emma sat in Catherine's greenhouse, now flourishing under her care, with the Blackwood family Bible in her lap. Its leather cover was worn smooth by generations of hands, its pages holding the story of those who had come before. Marcus found her there, surrounded by blooming roses. "Ready?" She nodded, opening to the family record pages. There, in fading ink, were the important moments of the Blackwood line. Births, marriages, deaths, including Catherine's, recorded in Marcus's strong hand. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "About time we made it official." He sat beside her, taking the pen she offered. "Unless you object." Emma touched her rounded belly. 6 months along now, the baby's strong and active. No objections. It just feels like a big step. Like finally letting ourselves be completely happy. Marcus understood. They both carried guilt about finding joy after loss, about letting new love bloom from grief's ashes. The Bible represented more than just family records. It was acceptance, that their happiness honored, rather than betrayed, their past loves. With steady hands, Marcus wrote, "Marcus James Blackwood and Emma Grace Sullivan Blackwood, married December 15th, 1885. Below that he added, "Child expected May 1886. "There," he said softly, "written in the family history, where it belongs." Emma traced their names with gentle fingers. On the opposite page she saw Charles's watch, carefully preserved between the leaves. She'd placed it there months ago, letting it rest among the pressed flowers that marked her new life's important moments. The frozen rose, the first crocus, a bloom from her wedding bouquet. "Look," she said, turning the page. There lay Catherine's handkerchief embroidered with winter roses. "I found it in the greenhouse and thought, she should be part of this too." Marcus's breath caught. "Emma, they'll always be part of our story." She took his hand. "But they're our past. This—" She pressed his palm to her stomach, where their child kicked in greeting. "This is our future." As if in response to her words, the baby gave a particularly strong kick. Marcus laughed, the sound rich with joy, strong like their mother, stubborn like their father. They smiled at each other, remembering how far they'd come from that first winter, from a marriage of convenience to a love that had survived fever, fear, and the ghosts of past grief. Rosa's voice carried from the schoolyard where the children were playing. "Papa says Mrs. Blackwood's baby will come when the spring roses bloom." "Wise man, Thomas Martinez," Marcus mused. "The roses are already budding." Emma closed the Bible, keeping Charles's watch and Catherine's handkerchief pressed between its pages. Not hidden away, but preserved as part of their larger story. "I've been thinking about names," she said. "Oh, Catherine Grace for a girl, Charles Marcus for a boy." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. "Perfect," he whispered. Through the greenhouse glass, they could see their school standing proud against the spring sky. Children's laughter mixed with the sound of ranch work, horses, cattle, the rhythm of their shared life. "Sometimes," Emma said, "I think about that first winter, how close I came to letting pride and grief steal my future. And I think about how close I came to letting fear keep me from love." Marcus touched the Bible in her lap. "But here we are, written in the family record, proof that love doesn't end with loss. It just changes shape." Emma leaned into his strength, feeling their child move between them. "Like roses blooming in winter?" "Like roses blooming in winter," he agreed. The greenhouse door burst open, and Rosa flew in, clutching a handful of wildflowers. "For the baby," she announced proudly. Emma accepted them gravely. "Thank you, dear. Shall we press them in the Bible to mark this day?" Rosa nodded eagerly, watching as Emma carefully arranged the flowers between the pages, adding to their growing history of love and memory and hope. "Tell me again," Rosa begged, "about how you and Mr. Blackwood fell in love." Emma met Marcus's eyes over the child's dark head. "Well," she began, "it started in the coldest winter, when a stubborn teacher was too proud to ask for help, and a lonely rancher was too afraid to offer it," Marcus added softly. "But love," Emma finished, "love found a way to bloom through the frost. The morning of May 1st dawned clear and bright, roses blooming in Catherine's greenhouse and hope blooming in Emma's heart. She stood before Thunder Valley's new school, her hand resting on her full belly, watching Marcus mount the gleaming brass bell in its tower. Perfect timing, he called down, the baby and the bell both ready to make their debut. As if in agreement, their child shifted restlessly. Emma smiled, remembering another bell, the frozen one from her first winter, silent with cold and grief. How far they'd come since then. Ready? Marcus climbed down, joining her beneath the bell tower. The whole valley had gathered for the official opening, ranch hands and townspeople alike, their children fidgeting in Sunday best. Emma gripped the new bell rope, its smooth length a promise of sound and future. Together, Marcus's hand covered hers, warm and strong. As one, they pulled. The bell's clear voice rang out across Thunder Valley, echoing off the mountains that had witnessed their journey from convenience to love. Emma felt tears start at the pure, sweet sound. Now that's a proper beginning, Thomas Martinez said, holding Rosa on his shoulders so she could see. The children surged forward, eager to explore their new school. Emma watched them flood into the bright classroom, their excited voices carrying through open windows. Mrs. Blackwood, Rosa called, come see your desk. But before Emma could move, she felt it. The first sharp pain that meant their child was ready to join the celebration. Marcus saw her expression change. Emma, your timing was more perfect than you knew, she managed, gripping his arm. The baby, his eyes widened. Mrs. Chen was already hurrying forward, taking charge with practiced efficiency. To bed now. Children will wait. Baby will not. The Valley women sprang into action, surrounding Emma with support and experience. As Marcus helped her toward home, the new bell continued to ring, the children unable to resist its shining rope. Like music, Emma breathed between pains. Like hope, Marcus agreed, his voice thick with emotion. Hours later, as spring sunset painted the valley gold, their daughter slipped into the world with a cry as clear as any bell. Catherine Grace Blackwood, born amid roses and promise, her eyes as dark as her father's. She's perfect, Marcus whispered, cradling her with careful hands. Emma watched them, her heart so full it hurt. Through the window, she could see the school bell silhouetted against the evening sky. Its shadow fell across their bed like a blessing. Our valley's newest student, she said softly. And newest teacher, Marcus smiled. She'll learn from your strength, your grace, and your love, Emma added, the kind that carries people through winter. He laid their daughter in her arms, then sat beside them, his family complete. Outside, spring bloomed in Catherine's greenhouse, and children's voices carried on the evening breeze. The new bell hung silent now, waiting for tomorrow's lessons. Emma thought of Charles's watch and Catherine's handkerchief, preserved in the family Bible, of frozen roses and first crocuses, of marriage certificates and school deeds, of all the artifacts of their journey from two broken hearts to this moment, of perfect joy. I love you, she told Marcus, their daughter sleeping between them, through every season, and I love you. He kissed her tenderly. My convenient bride who became my everything. Catherine Grace stirred, clutching her father's finger with surprising strength. New life, new hope, new love, all ringing out as clear and true as the bell that would call their valley's children to learn and grow. Tomorrow, that bell would ring again. Tomorrow, their daughter would begin learning the story of her family, of love lost and found, of hearts frozen and thawed, of roses that bloomed in winter and hope that survived the deepest cold. But tonight, in the quiet of their room, Emma and Marcus simply held each other and their miracle, listening to spring wind in the bell tower and knowing that love, like seasons, always returns stronger for having endured the frost.